Next on our agenda, we're going to have two of the greatest tennis players that have ever lived. Andre Agassi won 8 Grand Slam championships. He won all 4 majors. He won an Olympic gold medal. He's in the Hall of Fame. Stefanie Graf won 22 championships. She won each Grand Slam event 4 times. One year, she won a Grand Slam and an Olympic medal in the same year. These are two of the most dominant tennis players in history. But we're not just having them here because they're great tennis players. We've invited them to be on our stage because they're also great philanthropists. They're great business people. They're great people. All right, please.
Thank you for naming my accomplishments first, because that would have been really embarrassing if you said hers first.
Well, the accomplishments are great. Two of the greatest tennis players of all time. So, of course, we're going to start today with the question about pickleball. You guys are going to play, the two of you are going to play against John McEnroe and Maria Sharapova in an epic pickleball match on February the 4th. Can you guys, what's going on here?
ESPN too, live time. Let's go, bring it on. I mean, it's been fun. It's been an outlet for us in our life to do something together. Physical outlet's been crazy. I promise you, it's a lot more physical than you think. It's a real community kind of experience when you're with people in that proximity of distance, yet you're competing with them. And tennis kind of translates and kind of doesn't, so it's gotten in that process. And plus, I want to beat the shit out of Mac. pretty straightforward, I think.
Well, I think you kind of, so if you're not aware, this pickleball slam, it's $1 million challenge match. And last year, Andre Agassi and Andy Roddick beat Michael Chang and John McEnroe. But there was a point where things were going so bad for Johnny Mac that I think Stefanie had to come in and step in for a point or two.
Well, unbeknownst to myself, right? He just pulled me on the court. But that kind of, it was just a fun little moment there. But when they offered me to join for next year, that was an easy yes. But seeing them have so much fun and, like Andre just said, challenging yourself in a different environment, you don't get to do that too often. So it's been a lot of fun, and also to be together and doing something and getting better at it.
All right. We're going to be cheering for you guys.
Thank you.
Wanted to talk a little bit. We mentioned the philanthropy, but it's really pretty extraordinary. And Stefanie, you became involved with Children for Tomorrow. Gosh,
25 years
25 years now.
25 years.
Can you tell us about Children for Tomorrow and what was it that captured your imagination and made this such an important focus of your post-tennis life?
Yeah, so even before the 25 years, years before that, I got introduced to a professor that ran the outpatient clinic in Hamburg for traumatized children, traumatized through war, persecution, violence, and we had a lot of conversations, and he invited me to come and meet some of the children, and it was just changed my life. Just hearing the trauma, the experience that they had in their young life, and the difficulty they had being part of society, to have friends, to communicate, to just have hope. I wanted to help, and if you think back 27, 28 years ago, very few people talked about the inner wounds, about what trauma really does and how to deal with it. And and so over the years I got more and more involved, helping him raise awareness, helping raise funds, and then we ended up coming up with Children for Tomorrow. So at this point, we help about 1,000 kids with therapy to help their inner wounds heal. And so our headquarters is in Hamburg, and at this point, unfortunately, there's over 100 million refugees. When I started, there were about 20 million in the world. It's not getting easier. It's harder to raise the funds and to help the amounts of children, but trying.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned kind of where the state of the world was then in terms of our awareness that there were inner wounds, as you call them. I think mental health is something that, a lot of us have, as awareness has led to awareness, and I think particularly going through the pandemic, how fragile life is and how
Especially
fragile
the young,
people are, and at a young age.
Our young children, correct. Yeah, I think, it has really, gotten a complete different awareness at this point. And everybody's talking about now, what COVID has done to the children that haven't been able to go to school, have been isolated, been, just not with their friends, just not socializing. And then you can only imagine what happens to a child that grows up in a war-torn area.
Yeah. And Andre, you've been similarly focused on children, particularly education, the efforts that you have made K through 12, starting here in Las Vegas, but now with 130 some schools around the country. Can you talk about how you came to value young people in their education?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think one of your themes here, right, these few days is sustainability. And I think if there's something my foundation and Steph's foundation share in common is the idea of our future, right, of really breaking the cycle and allowing that hope to exist, that tomorrow can look better than yesterday and today. So my deal was pretty simple in education because of my lack of education, right? I left school in 9th grade. I didn't have choice but to play tennis. It was my father's dream. It was the fastest road to the American dream, and what have you. So being highly disconnected with the very thing I happen to be pretty good at left me in some pretty dark places. And when I really saw the children in my backyard, here in Las Vegas being one of the fastest growing cities for 30 straight years, I saw children that really didn't have a choice in their life. And the reason why they didn't have a choice is because of their lack of options through education, right? Their parents never, graduated high school, let alone college, and, the violence and the gangs and the incarcerations. And so I started to kind of go, geez, they're not so lucky. They don't have the luxury of bitching about being number one in the world at something, right? So I said it was like overnight where I said, this is now going to be my reason for what it is I do, And I took out a $40 million mortgage, literally, what seemed to be from one day to the next, and built my own charter school here and in the most economically challenged area. I mean, Las Vegas, I know you guys see it from one perspective when you come into town, but it is the 5th largest school district in America. It's pretty significant, and we're 50th in kids we put into college. So I really wanted to prove that children don't fail us, we fail them. And I did it through education. And then when you talk about sustainability, I kind of directed the philanthropic work towards a more comprehensive solution, which is if you can take a daunting societal issue and you can bring a private sector solution in a way that doesn't burden the system or burden the education, you have something that is real sustainable. So went to the private sector, put together a very innovative fund that was focused on the expansion of facilities for the best-in-class charter school operators. And anyhow, got pretty creative over the years, and in the 25 years I've been around, deployed close to $1.5 billion, built 130 schools, and continuing. It's not like I was working backwards from this big vision. I just keep trying to find ways to reaching more kids and making a bigger difference.
Yeah, and I loved what you said about, tomorrow can be better today than wherever you are. NBA is fortunate that we're headquartered in Washington, D.C. I know you have a school started there in Ward 8, one of the toughest parts. But Washington, D.C. was also a place for you personally where you had kind of reached a native. You had fallen from 1 to 141 in the world. You had challenges in your personal life, and I think you were ready to give up. Where did you find that strength to say, tomorrow's going to be better today, I'm going to refocus, I don't have to be where I'm stuck right now?
Yeah, well, geez, that's a loaded question. I know we only got a small amount of time, so I'll try to kind of be concise about it. But getting to number one in the world the first time for me was almost felt like an accident, even though I was highly committed to my childhood and all that. But getting to number one, I thought would be the moment where I would say, oh, this has been worth it, and now I feel connected, and now this kind of reconciles my sort of demons. But it didn't. It highlighted them, and I kind of went on a spiral. So I fell. I did a lot of things. We can talk about it another time. But I went to 141 in the world, and I was probably the only person on the planet that knew exactly why. Let's just put it that way. And I recognize that not all of us have the luxury of choosing our life. Matter of fact, none of us really do. I mean, choice is kind of, and control is kind of an illusion. I mean, we don't control where we're born. We don't control, what our strengths and weaknesses are. We don't control so many things. But it doesn't mean we can't take ownership, right? And that's what my journey became about. Falling from number 1 to 141 was taking ownership of my life, finding my reason. And I found my reason through impacting others, through education. So I was still connected to something, but it was much larger than me, and that kind of helped put me back on the path of saying, geez, I have my reason. Now when I got on that path, I never thought I could get back to number one, but I definitely said, I know I can be a hell lot better than I am today because I'm pretty lousy right now, right? So my goals became pretty bite-sized. It became daily, much harder doing it the second time because you're always aware of where you're not, but at the same time, keeping the focus on where am I and can I get better, and holding yourself accountable to that objective. So it was a daily fight in the beginning, but then it turned out to be one of the most beautiful experiences of my life. I looked up one day and I happened to be number one in the world again, but it didn't change. I was the same person I was at 140, just focused on getting better, even though there's nobody sort of ahead of me at the time. So it's quite a journey.
And Stephanie, your journey was a little bit different. You started playing tennis when you were 3. You turned pro at 13.
Correct.
You played in Wimbledon at 13. Is that right? You won a Olympic gold medal at 15. You spent over 7 years, 377 weeks, number one in the world.
Can we stop talking about all the things? It's just like,
it's interesting to the rest of us, Andre.
If she leaves me, I get half, right? I get half.
So I guess the question is, Andre talked about getting to number one, falling, coming back. You had sustained excellence. So what are the challenges associated with being the best in the world? Were there ever points you thought, okay, but if I don't change a bunch of stuff, that's all in the rearview mirror? How much did you change and evolve over that prolonged period where you were the greatest player in the world by far?
Well, because the number one was not, it was maybe it was somewhere the goal, no question, but for me, it was a challenge every day to be better. So for me, it was kind of challenging myself, especially with tennis. It's really hard. It's an extremely long season. When we played, it literally was year-round. Very few sports do this with with a lot of highlights, with the 4 Grand Slams, and then a few of the really big tournaments. So, you kind of just, I for myself constantly felt the challenge. It wasn't the challenge to stay number one, but just for me to get better at what I was doing. And so that is, and you feel like you never quite get there anyway. So I kept going. But I loved being out there. I loved getting to get the body and the mind right, which is the hardest thing in tennis, is to have the physical part match the concentration and the being at the moment. So it just kept me intrigued for such a long time.
And I loved playing after her all those years because I knew exactly what I was going on the court in 42 minutes. She was going to win in 42 minutes, and then it was my time. Everybody wanted to play after her.
Well, let me. We've talked about philanthropy. We've talked about tennis. Let's talk a little bit about the business world. And Andre, you've talked about bringing private sector solutions to education, but the two of you together separately have, you've invested in real estate, you've invested in restaurants, you've invested in water parks, you have your line of furniture. What is it that has you focused when you make an investment? What is it you're looking for, and how much coordination and collaboration do the two of you have on business matters?
I would size it up in a couple of pretty clear priorities. I mean, number one, it has to be authentic. It has to be something that we're connected to, we believe in, whether it's logistically. I was born and raised here in Las Vegas, where it's bringing, you mentioned water park as an example, bringing Wet and Wild back, which actually used to be right here on the strip. So it starts from an authentic point. But what I would say is we invest in people. I mean, that's really what it is. It's not ideas. I mean, a great idea with wrong people. So it's kind of a no investing with asshole policy, right? I mean, you want people. It boils down to you, right? You, and that to me is the biggest thing. When you see somebody with clear conviction, clear discipline, clear passion, and there's a reason to care and be involved. It's like why not? I mean, it doesn't mean you always win, but at the same time, it's a pretty good quality of life if you do it that way.
And things like the Agassi Graf furniture line, are there design issues with that, or you kind of went into that saying we feel good about where we are here together?
Mike Christ was a friend of ours that lived really close by, who was with the Christ Furniture, and the idea of doing design was something that Stefanie was really connected to, and the idea of doing that together was like it was just sheer fun, and
yeah.
It does well or it does better, or, that became very secondary.
And whether you're athletes, entrepreneurs, business people, philanthropic, you have a lot of demands on your time. You need to be where you need to be when you need to be there. And I know business aviation has been part of that. You've had a Jetstar, you've had a Challenger 604, you've participated in fractional programs, subscription programs. Can you talk a little bit about how important it is to have control of your schedule, your environment, and be where you need to be when you need to be there?
Yeah, listen, I mean, we've grown up in airplanes. That's how I kind of see it, with our sport. You travel around the world, so being in airplanes was something, I mean, I always loved. And so, the involvement, even when I look back, when the first time I flew to Australia, I think it took 32 hours to get to from Germany, and to see how aviation has changed. But we've come to use, the change in aviation and technology. So for us, Andre has stepped a little earlier into the private sector than I have. Yeah. In Germany, the logistics are a little closer, so it's a little easier with travel. But I think you can talk a little more in terms of.
Yeah, well, I mean, for me, it's about efficiencies. I don't mind grinding a couple hours to fly 12 hours, right? But sometimes it's really rough grinding a couple hours to fly an hour, to fly 2 hours, right, to go come back. The idea of me being able to go do what I need to do and be back home for dinner or to take the kids to school was such a huge importance and priority. You know, I mean, I've owned 3 airplanes in my life. Gave up the last one when the entire world shut down. There was nowhere to travel to, so what's the point? But yeah, no, it's I was always comfortable in an airplane. It was the only place you could really shut down. And so while we jumped from continent to continent, literally sometimes from week to week, that part was more enjoyable for me and also for Steph than I think a lot of people might think. You know, it's kind of your time. You know, you can kind of, and then through some of my planes, I always got interested in flying as well, and kind of wanted to learn, but just found it way too comfortable sitting in the back. I never quite made that leap, but nevertheless, you have to get to places that you can't always access so conveniently, and you have to do it in short order because you got time zones, jet lags, performance issues to worry about, and controlling all the things you can't control was a big part of us being the best of ourselves.
So let's shift gears a little bit and touch a little bit on family, because I think you both have famously intense fathers, demanding fathers. And in many ways that pushed you both to greatness, but it is a very challenging environment. You have a son and a daughter. You are clearly very devoted to family. How have you approached allowing them to be themselves and encouraging them to be their best selves?
You want to take it or you want me to?
No, I think we're both always on the same page, so I'm good with you.
Yeah. So I think this is a true statement for everybody, which is sometimes we spend all our time as parents giving our kids what they never had, but that can come kind of at the risk or the cost of not giving them some things that we did have, right? So I'll speak to my father, me being a child, and the one thing that I never had was choice. But the one thing I did have was a dedication and appreciation for work and work ethic. I will take somebody who's willing to work harder than somebody that's more talented every day of the week. So my application to our children has been, you will have choice. I never had it. I'm going to hopefully give you what I didn't have, but hopefully I won't neglect what I did. And so therefore, if something is important to you and you choose it, then you better make sure your life is reflecting that on a daily basis, right? Holding them accountable to the things that they claim are important to them, and you know, day to day, subtleties and all those applications. But I think in principle, it was a fair way for us to approach raising our kids. To say we don't care is not a statement. It doesn't matter what's important to you and what you choose, or it matters very much what's important to you and what you choose. So let's live like it's important to you, right? And so that's the accountability that we wanted. And as a result, they have their own journey, and it's a beautiful one that we get to share. And one of the ones that pays us back for giving up our childhood, right? I mean, think about it, to play Wimbledon at 13. Imagine how you have to spend the first 13 years of your life to be at Wimbledon at 13, right? So you give up everything as a youngster, and not crying victim. It's an incredible journey, and it gave us an incredible life. But you really don't call that even until you actually realize you have children and you're not off trying to build a company or do something or work, or we actually could raise and experience our children's childhood, and that's kind of when we went, you know what, scales are pretty even, pretty grateful.
And then let's just and then let's just finish with touching on the two of you, because in some ways you can seem very different. In other ways, you seem very similar. The tennis, the fathers, the championships, the pressures. But it was actually kind of at the end of tennis you really found each other. And I have to wonder if the fact that each of you knows the pressure that comes with the pursuit of constant excellence and the challenge of that gives you maybe an understanding that it's potentially at a different level than maybe other couples.
Yeah, I mean, we for sure know what the other one had to go through. I think that total understanding, but I think, the similarities and the differences are much more in the inside than really the sport or the growing up. I mean, there's the understanding for each other there, but I think, even with when you were just asking about the raising of the children, I think we're on the same page so many ways in terms of our priorities and kind of the things that we care about and what's important to us, that there's a whole lot more similarities than I think one
Yeah,
can see.
let's see who got the better end of this deal. When we met each other, met each other. We played for years, but we didn't. When we came together, I was 29 and I went to #1 in the world, and she retired. So it shows you what we each bring to the table. Like, she helps me, and I don't know, do something. Yeah, but it is amazing, and it's not so much that you know what the other one. It's the things you don't have to say, right? It's not the words you actually do say. It's the things you don't have to say that make the demands of what we were going through so much easier.
All right, well, there's I guess one last thing. I think when we started today, we asked everybody to go to climbingfast.com and to get involved in Climbing Fast, help the world know about it. I will say one other thing that I would recommend to everybody who's just had an opportunity to hear this interview. I would go to YouTube and I would watch the induction that Andre provided to Stefanie at the International Hall of Fame. And talking about how every day with the chalkboard he writes love notes. Because when you see that, it may remind you of that famous Modern Family where the guy's complaining that Gene Cernan wrote his daughter's initials on the moon and they'll always stay there and make the rest of the fathers feel bad that they can't do that. This was an incredible moment that I think underscores the relationship of two incredible people, and it has been a joy to have you on the stage with us today. Thank you.